Yeah, so welcome to this session. So I know this is an area, right? Biotechnology, and why this area that we chose. We know that there are few understanding of a cybersecurity that we have generic understanding of cybersecurity, and most of the leading sectors of implementation, like for example, banking we know, telecom we know, ITITS we know basically. There are some sectors which are now becoming as very important sectors to look from the cybersecurity perspective and for that matter privacy perspective as well actually. So that's what there is attempt, we always been making attempt to bring this discussion to the specific sector which would become a very important, and for them which will security and privacy will become very important in coming future basically. So, and then we thought that no matter it is a small gathering, but small discussion would be very important to carry forward the discussion in that particular segment. And especially after pandemic, what had happened in last 2 years, sometimes the cycle of any drug that you are developing or any vaccine you are developing or any biotechnology product that you are trying to bring to the table basically has significantly coming down. And people are saying in coming future, the velocity of a development of those product and those kind of solutions in a biotechnology sense will be significantly enhanced. So next time people say the pandemic that we see now, there will be very abilities that we have been creating, and a lot of those technology, especially the AI, ML, and more importantly the quantum computing, one of the key important application of quantum computing that people are saying it can be used for the biotechnology field basically. So this sector has a very significant kind of a relation to cybersecurity and to a certain extent to privacy as well, because the disruption that cybersecurity can cause to the designs that are now being seen in the biotechnology field, and we know that biology and information technology coming together would be revolutionizing the way the things would be coming in the future. So the purpose of this particular session is to deliberate, whatever small number of people coming together, deliberate. So it's not like we two are talking here. Basically, we want you to also contribute to the discussion here. Is to discuss about, deliberate about why we need to take such kind of discussion to different sectors. So we had been, as a DSCI, we had recently published something on the health sector and the issues and challenges that it will see in terms of the privacy and security. But now in health sector, biotechnology is very specific area basically, right? And sometimes pharma company happens to be biotechnology, but now there are specific companies which are coming in biotechnology as well. So here we are will try to put some points and also try to hear from you that how do you see things are evolving in this particular sector. And for that, I was just discussing with Mohit, and he's one of the pioneer in cybersecurity field especially, and building quite interesting technology solutions in the cybersecurity space, and trying to see whether these solutions are relevant to different sectors that he worked with basically. So with him and with all of you being joining here, I think if you want, you can come in the front and we can have more engaging discussion on this. We'll deliberate on this cyber biosecurity, and they say that some critical sector like a power sector or transportation sector, the cyber could create a quite significant ramification. It could be quite a significant kinetic impact it will create. But in biology, the issues and problem will be quite significantly different basically, right? It will be not only the typical critical sector discussion apply here. So disruption will be definitely there. Public order, especially if it is power sector, the public order disruption is definitely one of the important point. But in bio, I think you will be basically fundamentally changing many things basically. And there are a lot of attacks which are coming here, disruption attacks, especially in the context of the pandemic, those people who have been developing those vaccines, the kind of attacks they have seen. And I am seeing now some of the key players, I can't take their name. Until now, the security wasn't very serious and significant function there. But after pandemic, I have seen the key player in India, you know them, who has been involved in a development of the vaccine, has started now putting CISO function, started putting security function basically, which was not there until now basically. So one of my friends is now CISO, is one of the larger biotechnology company, and especially the vaccine development company. So Mohit, with this context, would like to hear your view, because you understand market well and different sectors well. So how do you see vis-a-vis other sector, how exactly this sector would be evolving from the cybersecurity perspective?
So So I think you use the first word, cyber biosecurity. That's very, very important, because I would honestly say I've been interacting with the I will say the entire healthcare industry for the last 8 years. And when we used to approach them and say, you need to have cybersecurity, they would come back and say, I don't need it. I have nothing to do with cybersecurity. But around the pandemic side, right, the moment the vaccinations started getting, that's the pharma side, right? When we're talking about the bio side, that's the biotechnology. They started realizing a couple of things. One of the most important things was the data they keep, right? The clinical data. Now that clinical data is normally now kept on the machines and the servers, right, which are interconnected. During the pandemic time period, most of the research was happening remotely, in terms that whatever clinical data they were getting, except the guys who were actually working on creating the vaccine, which was a limited 20, 30 people, but the guys who were analyzing that information, the backend was still doing a remote access, right? So then, I remember one of the discussions I had with Vinayak, and he says, is there something, we can start creating in India for remote, like Zoom, right? Something similar to Zoom where it's more secured, right? So that got into a picture that these guys in biotech suddenly realized, or I would say the entire healthcare realized, that there's a gap. They never had a security function. One of the biggest challenges I understood from them was that, they have an open system. That means I, as an individual, could use their website and get inside their entire infrastructure. It's not a difficult task because they have left those ports open. Why? Because the CISO is there. But the moment the CISO, who's coming from a banking environment or some other environment, goes and tells the management, we need to implement a SI and we need to implement a firewall, we need to do XYZ reasons, the pushback would be, you don't need it. We are not an IT company, it's a support function. So it would go back as a support function rather than a main function. Post-pandemic, Vinayak said very candidly, no names taken, but we all know, it was all across the globe, right? Vaccination companies were compromised. They were compromised exhaustively, right? Now, what do they compromise? What were they compromised on? They were compromised on the clinical data which they collected. Why is that important? I mean, I can delve into that deeper because I spent a couple of years in my, I would say, earlies, when I completed my graduation, I started doing a PhD. And I started doing my PhD in biophysics, right? So I have a very close relationship because I was working on a dual PhD with IIT Delhi and Delhi University South Campus. I was working on biophysics in the South Campus and I was working on optical fibers with Dr. Ajoy Ghatak. So we were trying to make a probe using an optical fiber to be able to go back and to see into your system. And we were using AI. We were using AI technologies like Lisp and Prolog. Most of the guys may not know Lisp and Prolog existed. I use those technologies, right? I'm a MASM programmer. So we were using MASM or microassembler to be able to go and connect to that device and see it. It's a biotechnology, right? That's where we started about getting more devices into the being, right? Take a simple example of heart stent, right? Now the stents are also getting interesting, right? You're going to get stents which will be able to tell you how much of blood flow is happening in your system on your mobile phone, right? You'll be able to get your pacemaker which tells you exactly how much is happening. Or for example, in the bio side, if you look at the agriculture biotech, right? Which is you're creating a specific variety of wheat, which is requiring the least amount of water, or rice which requires least amount of water. What happens if that technology gets stolen? So Vinayak, this is a very important, I would say, important topic because everybody focuses on critical infrastructure, but luckily, globally, everybody's agreed that biotech is also now a part of the critical infrastructure.
And just to add, this area, especially, this was largely because of the pandemic and the kind of attacks that we are seeing in terms of disruption. So for the audience here, basically, so there is a FBI, AAS, and ED CRI has come together and they set up a kind of a framework for testing the assurance of a biotechnology units from the security perspective, basically. So there's already some work which is happening in terms of setting up framework, setting up practices for the ensuring the biosecurity. And why somebody like FBI came to the picture? Because the impact here will be quite significantly impaired, basically, right? So playing something with because there is supply chain issue as well. So for making one Covishield vaccine, there are almost 200 different kind of components basically that will come together, and there are a lot of chemical industry which also get into the picture basically, and that's all goes in terms of developing a particular product basically we all use basically. So one is the disruption. So if I really look at from the, if you have to really decompose the issues of security here basically. One is the disruption, and disruption can happen, you can look at attacking the systems which are connecting to IT. That could be one thing, but disruption of supply chain was another important thing. So entire supply chain is now increasingly becoming more and more transparent, and how can you disrupt that? And that could be another important thing which was being we recognize as one of the important attack vector. The machineries which have been used for this biotechnology experimentation had been increasingly connected to internet, so that machineries getting targeted is another important threat vector here basically. Then the data stealing, espionage is very important, critical, because those formulas that are being used to develop this kind of vaccines or develop this kind of product. So I was in Maharashtra, there's one company, it's probably only company in India who now Serum used to have horses. Some of you must be doing the development of vaccine requires you horses basically, but Serum stopped that because there's a lot of questions mark that come from the animal rights perspective basically. There's still some company needs to be doing that basically, and they hatch some of those vaccine in horse, and those vaccines are being used, and a lot of those byproducts basically can be filling to the larger vaccine ecosystem, or some of these anti-cancer drugs basically that is being used basically. So those drugs also require such kind of thing. So this company has almost 200 plus horses, a lot of those machinery, a lot of those kind of people, and very small remote place of Maharashtra basically. I visited that company last year and seen the kind of work they do, and kind of the automation that is happening there, and kind of connection that they have basically, right? And the kind of data and kind of clinical research they have been trying to do basically, and kind of formula that is coming out of it, and which is spilling into the overall supply chain of the modern age drugs that is coming in basically. So in all of that basically, so IL-6, I'm not sure whether any of yours, if somebody has gone to this COVID, so IL-6 is one parameter which implies a lot of those body parameters, and for those kind of things, they have been developing drugs basically, and in the supply chain, those kind of ecosystem, and there are a lot of such biotechnology startups that we are seeing all across country now. I had visited IIT Madras's IT research park, and there's separate unit altogether which has biotechnology startup. Government of India to the Department of Science and Technology, there is a BIRAC. There's one institution which looks at the investment into biotechnology kind of startups and biotechnology ecosystem. TDB or DST, which has given 100 crore rupees to this Bharat Biotech to develop this vaccine. So a lot of investment also coming in this area, and this is being recognized as one of the important critical area. Even national security perspective, there is a, if you have followed the discussion about the core, it is talking about, this is one of the important critical area between these four nations like India, US, and Australia and Japan. We need very careful watch on the technology evolution happening in this area basically. So strategically this becomes very important area, and in coming future this will become very critical area, and now increasingly they are been leveraging the cloud, they are leveraging the application ecosystem API basically. So this is like a decomposing the security paradigm or context for the biotechnology area basically. So in that, I think the OT, cyber physical will also come into picture, because the machines are increasingly connected to internet. In that, the IT system, because increasingly they are also charting the journey of industry 4.0, and a lot of IT systems are getting integrated. And then another important part, which is also data and data security will be very important. And fourth important part is all of that is also gradually moving to cloud as well, because many at an international level, if you look at, collaboration between these different players basically, right? So all of these players, like for example, our Serum got some formula, that's why we could able to manufacture the Covishield here basically, right? So this collaboration between these different players also becomes very important, and cloud would be one of the important thing to look at. So these 4 or 5 areas that needs to be factor when we talk about the security paradigm here actually.
So like you've touched upon a very, I would say, important topic, frameworks, right? When you mentioned frameworks, I'm just going to go back slightly in time to around 2012. We were working with this Department of Telecom, and they wanted to have a framework of security testing, right? And I had just moved into this company called Codenomicon, and the challenge I was that I had worked in a company called 3Com, Huawei 3Com. So I understood the Chinese perspective of how things move, right? So they wanted a framework. The challenge was the framework which IT was using was far matured, at least 15 years ahead of what telecom was going to move into. Now the same thing comes back out here in biotech. We are still, I would say 30, 35 years behind IT on the frameworks. But there's a common thread. The common thread is everybody has the same problem statement. So when somebody asks me, what is the difference in cybersecurity for a biotech versus critical infrastructure like a thermal power generation station versus telecom versus a software development organization? I don't think so there's any difference. The infrastructure remains the same, it's only the way you consume it. So if you were to make a framework, right, even if you look at the US frameworks, 80% is common across all the other things, and 20% is just a simple 80-20 theory. 20% is what is being specific to that industry or the problems that industry faces. Now, what is the problem a biotech is going to face? I can relate to it because my own daughter is working in, she's doing a PhD in biotech, and she's working on cancer when you suggest the cancer. So I asked her this question long before. So during COVID times, she is in the US, and I asked her, how do you go back and up and down? You know, because the cycle which she's trying to create is a chemical, or you can say a gel, responsible for cancer, right? So you can implant that gel into the body, and that will stop the growth of cancer and maybe mitigate it, right? So I asked her the question, how do you do that? She says, I go every 4 hours, put that, and I monitor the system online using my laptop in my house. So that's my first area of security concern. I asked her the question, do you have a VPN? She says, no, I just connect straight. So I said, this is one major problem for biotech companies. If you're going to be doing this entire activity remotely, you need to have secured connectivities. Second challenge statement which you said, Vinayak, was data, right? Data is, I respect, all due respect to Mr. Ambani, data is the next oil, right? It is the next oil. Whosoever has the data has the oil. People are moving towards a couple of things in biotech. One of the major things is every one of us may not be doing it, but some of us may go back and say, I want my DNA origination. So you get a DNA chart made to figure out how you originated, right? So you're able to trace a family tree, and you're able to do a lot of things. In the US, people get the DNA generation done so that they can look at what diseases or what are the weaknesses in your DNA which can cause you to do fall sick. For example, I was just telling Vaishnu, I said, we do a DNA for Vaishnu, and if we find out he's allergic to peanuts, right? So by giving him a peanut, right, he can go into a stroke immediately. So if you are able to get that information about any individual, any company which is doing on the DNA, and you're storing that information, that gets compromised, you can launch a typical, you can say, an attack on anyone or anybody you want specifically. So you need to secure that data too. So you need to have a very secured platform. That's what the US also talks about, is that they want to secure the data, they want to have data privacy, they want to ensure that all data, static, dynamic, and in motion, should always be encrypted. Right to information, meaning that only the right person who has access to the data should be able to allow data. So these two framework, a framework of course is very important. DSCI is a platform where you can go back to the government and say we need to have some frameworks around biotech itself, right? Though we are 25 years behind IT, which is the leader, but it's good to learn. And the best thing I like about this is that most of our folks from the IT segment are migrating to that. So they get along with them a lot of knowledge which they have learned in the last 20, 25 years, specifically coming from the banking segment, because I'm proud to say as an Indian that our banking segment technology is far, far, far ahead of anywhere in the world, honestly, because I've seen that in the US, anything on that front, right? So if we were able to get some framework specific to India, right, which can help us out, that would be very, very helpful.
Yeah, and then in this, one is, there are definitely some biotechnology players which we are in touch with, and with them we are trying to deliberate on what needs to be done, and probably through them that we also would like to engage with the regulators there, basically. So, but from the framework perspective, for the benefit of this audience, let me tell about 3 different framework which is in making and which already been used in one of the most of the, especially in the US, I'm seeing that happening basically. So because the relevance of this subject for bioterrorism kind of activity, relevance of this subject for the larger security of the population from all other thing, including this pandemic and vaccination perspective. So FBI taken a kind of initial step to define the framework. So that framework is to evaluation the security risk of the biotechnology industry. So that's the one of the known framework and being used and utilized by some of the biotechnology industry, and that is being used by FBI kind of organization. Largely you'll see because this has to do with a lot of internal security as well, and that's why somebody like home security ecosystem Department of Homeland Security ecosystem that will be definitely looking at this as a component. And that's why this framework is largely driven by the larger national law order security concerns, and this is FBI framework which is there. There's also the National Academies of Science, Engineering and Medicine, so NISAM, NASCM, so which has also evolved some framework for technology in especially synthetic biology, because that's another new area which is emerging in terms of you build the biological product synthetically, basically. So issues of security and privacy in that is also being discussed. There is a Tucker framework as well for the governance to address the security governance of the biotechnology industry. So gradually these practices, these standards, and more importantly the frameworks are evolved to take care of some of the security issues here, basically. So some of the challenges in this particular domain remain as a the field, because this field is you have the larger, bigger player in this field, and they may be probably taking quite a significant effort in terms of securing and maintaining security. But there are a lot of small players in this field as well, actually, right? There are a lot of startups in this area, and startups are getting quite significant kind of a support from the government plus investment ecosystem. Last year, there have been record number of the investment happen in biotechnology. London, UK is being called as a hub for life sciences technology, basically, and a lot of investment is flowing at that area. Now investors are also getting aware about the things that could go from the security privacy perspective wrong. Another important area here to really reflect on from the biotechnology perspective is how exactly biotechnology will be used in the future. Now people are saying that the medicines are still generic medicine, basically. The same drug is prescribed for all of the population, basically, right? So going forward, the medicine can be very personalized, basically, depending on the individual body parameter. And there are ways to collect that body parameter. There are some electronic insertable pill that will be coming in your body that could help you understand you better. And based on that, a specific drug can be devised only for you, basically. So by overall, the medicine ecosystem is also going for more personalized medicine, basically. A lot of those would require you maybe requiring to collect a lot of those sensitive personal information, and that there are ecosystem which is getting created for this, basically. And then that will be creating another level of challenge, but it is also opening quite a good opportunity for a lot of startups to work in this area, basically. And there are a lot of startups in this area. Means we know that in genetic science, usually we have a lot of startups, at least 2-3 of them very well known as well. So in this ecosystem, I think data and privacy would become very important part, and there are some people here from the privacy field as well. Now we can have you also contribute to the subject as well. So before we that, Mohit, anything?
Yeah, no, I think Vinayak very correctly said. I already know. Again, I'm just going to repeat, because I know at least more than half a dozen plus companies who are actually working on specific things, like including things like hair. So if you want, they'll create a specific shampoo only meant for you. It doesn't work for the other person, because if you're having a hair fall or a dandruff, they work for it, right? Or even specific medicines, old traditional ways was they would do a biopsy and then create a specific drug for you. That's getting automated. Actually, it's getting automated as we speak, right? There are lots of startups even in coming up in India, which I know of. They're only focusing on doing specific drug prescription, which is creating specific drugs for you. That means they'll do a complete DNA analysis of you and do that. Challenge, like you mentioned, data. Now, if that data is available, it can be used, it can be misused. Now, if you are a person of critical importance, it will be misused. If you are of no importance, he doesn't look at the data. But irrespective down the line, if that data is, it's across, you'll be able to create a genetic framework to figure out if, let's say they want to do a biological warfare, and they know, for example, they've got a data of around 1 million people in a certain location, right? And they are able to create a genetic, because they are all using AI and ML, right? They are able to create a genome sequence and say, this particular drug or this particular intoxication can kill 80% of the population. That's a biological warfare. It can be misused. So securing that information about a specific thing. Like I said, even in stents right now, so I'm talking to somebody I know about, a friend of mine who's a doctor. He says now in the US, they're working on stents which can be implemented, and you look at the stent device on your phone and you can figure out how much your blood flow is happening. So one of my friends is diabetic, so he has this small diabetic meter on his arm, pasted. So he's able to monitor his diabetes, right? But his doctor gets the information. Just think about it if it's misused by anybody. So securing that data is very, very important.
Yeah. So now I think we try to probably unpeel the different layers that will go in terms of security in a biology industry, especially the. So anybody would like to comment or put an observation or any question that we have, so we all can deliberate on a question.
Just as Mohit just now said, actually, one of the, in fact, one of the challenges that we face, we are a startup actually in the field of cybersec. Now, one of the challenges that we face is even as we talk or discuss with a lot of critical infrastructure guys or people in the manufacturing sector or in the PSPs or in the PSUs, even insurance, government providers and all that particularly, they would discuss, that's fine, I mean we discuss to any level, but the question is when it comes down to specifics and all that, they first of all they shy away immediately after that first level of discussion or putting up points or raising questions in forums and all that stuff. So I'm not very sure. They might be apprehensive that they are not the single point and all that. Now, the second point is that, like Mohit had said, for much of these things, including the pharma sector or in the biotech or the manufacturing or critical infrastructure, probably there could be one framework actually which can address maybe up to 80% of the major things, except for the 20% which could be specific to the particular sector or in some specific cases. Now, having said that, actually, for example, probably a body like DSCI could help actually become one accumulation point for the different, the customer inputs or the use cases or even specific pain points and all that stuff. That, of course, I mean, for us to work on specific, offerings, or we could basically then fine-tune whatever products or something that we are trying to push into customers, having to go through
I
cycle
got
of
the
education.
question exactly. So, and
Because
that's the
we are finding
intent.
it
Yeah. So that's
difficult.
the intent of doing this kind of interactions here. So this is not only me. This forum is not only to just discuss about the challenges problem,
Right.
but what we want to really do and we have been doing is today not only biotechnology. So we are working with health sector organization and
Right.
working with them to create a. See, I know this also creates a market for us, right? So this also create markets for both product and services actually, and we need
Right.
to. That is a byproduct basically. One is to addressing the concern is very important, and for that we need to create awareness. We need to bring the people together, and with them we need to take it to the respective regulatory body. Suppose these 2-3 frameworks I just talked about is coming in US, there may be some framework that we can think about in India as well, right? So, so that's the intent of doing this discussion. So today only I did a discussion with some of the aviation player, and in aviation there are two things basically. One is airline player. There are three things basically. One is airline, and then another is airline infrastructure, and then there is a tertiary place like a Make My Trip, which helps you to book the ticket. And then everywhere we are talking about digital experience basically, right? So we are trying to also galvanize, mobilize the aviation industry to see and deliberate on what exactly is happening there and how can we mature practices there, and also mobilize the regulatory bodies to take digitization and security and privacy on the agenda. Similarly, last couple of weeks back, I had visited Chennai. I met some of the port, and we have been meeting some of the ports, and we know the challenges there in port different. So we are working with some of the port companies and try to see whether we can work with the industry body, work with the regulators there to bring some kind of a context for the cyber security basically, right? And we had a lot of attacks in Indian port infrastructure basically. Likewise, we are working with the Space Industry Association as well. So there's a Space Industry Association now, and with them we are trying to see whether we can create a framework for space industry. So this effort of putting this discussion here is to see something that we can do for the biotechnology industry as well. And that will definitely, eventually will lead to some kind of market possibility for a company like you, basically.
Right.
Abhilash?
Hello, sir. This is Abhilash. I'm CEO and founder of a company called Privacy Tech Company. There are multiple references of data as oil. So we are working as refinery layers for that data, so that privacy is not violated while doing things like accelerated drug discovery, etc. So I would like to understand what is the level of interest in the Indian pharma space in privacy protection. And in US, for example, we have something like HIPAA privacy rule. We are also working on non-personal data guidelines in India. Are there any specific focus on the health side? How data needs to be handled, especially for these critical kind of things, and how is that evolving, and what is the future?
So Mohit, you are working with your client in this area. So what is your experience in
I'll
this?
be very honest. I'll answer both your question as well as your question. When you go to a client, he always takes all the inputs he wants, but he never takes a decision, right? And this is the biggest challenge in India I've faced throughout my life. I am just going back to 2000, sorry, I'm just going back again in time. I'm going back to 2004. I was in this company called SafeNet, now acquired by Thales. And everybody wanted RTGS, right? I was instrumental in rolling out RTGS. Till the time there was no mandate, nobody bought an HSM. Once there was a mandate, everybody bought it. So same goes here. If the government puts across a mandate and tells every pharma company, you got to follow the rule. So I'll just give you a simple example. You go to the US, you don't open your window, don't throw your banana skin out. You come back to India, you open the window and throw your banana skin out. Why? Because there's no compliance out here. And over there, you not do it because you look fool. You look like a fool. It's foolish. It's not right. It's not correct to do it. So if there was an implementation, because we have to go back to the government, it's not an overnight journey. This is a very major decision to get out a mandate, right? If you get a mandate, it can't be yours and mine and his, right? It has to be a global consensus or consensus among the affected parties. So you and I are not affected parties. We are just technology providers to the affected parties. So the affected parties are the bio companies or pharma companies or biotech companies who need to talk about their issue statements. And only then you can go back to them.
And then we have to learn from the experimental sector, like called RBI. So RBI regulated banking industry quite well and quite advanced. So that's why there is a investment is happening, and RBI has gone to the extent of devising
almost 600 plus kind of controls, and that's why the investments are happening, and there is an obligation as well, right? So RBI also do audit and probably ask them to report any breach happen, basically. So I know that some sectors will be quite mature in terms of the regulating and creating that extrinsic driver, right, basically. And there's some sector which is suddenly going for the digitization journey, and they may not have a regulator as well. Some sector like a bank or telecom would have a regulator, but in biotechnology, in pharma, they have regulator, but the regulator may not be taking security and privacy on the agenda. So as a security fraternity, it's our role and it's our job that we should be creating developing agenda at a regulatory level, because everywhere I go, I mean, today only I was discussing on aviation sector, the kind of digitization plan that aviation sector is making on all three legs I just talked about. So unless there is a push, external push, they may, unfortunately, especially in data side, because data side, you need some external regulatory push, basically. Because data is not yours, right? So for security, you may be doing something, but still we find a lot of challenges in terms of organization intrinsically investing in security. But at least from privacy perspective, there's a lot of external push that is required. And unfortunately, we had been doing our effort in data protection regulation, but again, that process is still seems now long, because now again, there is a new bill that will be coming. But once that comes, and most of the Indian organization, as Mohit talked about, is just wait for the regulations to come, let it get notified, and then we'll look at this one. So this is definitely one thing. But another important part, which I will also try to agree with Mohit, is Indian market is still not that conducive for the new solutions, new product, and to be adopting, basically, right? And the investment in security. So I run one, I started doing kind of a India-US CISO forum, kind of and then I see the kind of interest in US CISO, right? The kind of kind of effort they take in terms of development of technology actually. So most of them, if you look at, they will contribute. So I have some of those kind of mentors from Indian US CISO ecosystem. The kind of interest they take to help our startup to build the product is quite significantly. Secondly, the culture is their risk taker culture, because they know and they had seen the kind of industry that they had seen locked out, those including Target and many other breaches which had happened. So one small thing could create larger problem for them, and that's why you need to take a risk to solve that particular use case. And that's why there is an intent of working with a startup there, and also CISO go ahead and invest into startups as well actually. So that ecosystem is still not there, but gradually it is coming. At least it's coming to the level that people are at least now started listening, at least private sector CISOs started listening to startups basically, and CIOs also actually. And most importantly, in the coming future, we'll see the public sector unit also. I'm working with one of the defense unit basically, and we are developing a lot of good technology. Almost 15 of my startups are working with them to develop an entire stack of security. Right? So that is changing, but we need significant effort to develop market. And it is not only for development market, they also need this kind of security posture upgradation, right, in defense sector actually.
Just to add to what you're saying is, I'm thinking everybody's in this room. How many of you have got a cancer, taken a insurance against cancer? Maybe 1%. Yes. Reason is, हमारे घर में किसी को cancer नहीं हुआ, right? So it's the same thing. You got to have a risk-taking appetite. So if till the time this, that organization is not hit by a cyber attack, they don't realize the consequence of a cyber attack. So it's our job as security experts to go and educate them. It's going to be, it's not an easy task, it's an uphill task, which has to be worked in conjunction, like Vinayak mentioned. We have to work in conjunction. We got to give our recommendations back to DSCI and say, these are the problem statements we see as an external investigator, right? So the internal, which is the pharma company, will see on their side, and it's a debate, right? Whether it's about the risk versus the reward, right? If the risk is high and you're going to spend $1 million on creating a data privacy solution, and you've got a very strong infrastructure which is impregnable, there's no fun in, again, it's a give and take relationship.
Yeah. So Yarama.
Now in India, we are beginning to have these gene profiling labs, right? Otherwise, mostly that used to happen in labs in Europe or Atlanta in the US and all of that. And they're not a classic diagnostic lab companies, right? Can you share something, this for my knowledge I'm asking, can you share something, what are recommended frameworks for such labs, which are not a classic pathology lab or a classic diagnostic lab for gene profiling, because we all know one company in Hyderabad is doing well. So I would like to know, for this category of labs, are there any globally recommended, accepted?
So honestly, if you ask me, I haven't come across on the net or even in the US when I was speaking to folks there on something specific to that particular problem statement of gene labs. But as a security guy, the first problem statement I can see from here is that first is, if you're gene sequencing, right, the knowledge is there on your database, so I need to secure it. That's my first viewpoint, because if I'm allowing you to sequence my gene, right, or do my DNA sequencing complete, then you're owning owning my DNA sequence. So that means you got to take the rightful ownership, including security for that. So that first aspect is going to be on the digital side of securing that data. Second is, it should be like an escrow account where you can't decrypt my data till the time I give you an authority. It should not be an OTP based, which we started doing on certain platforms in India. OTP aa gaya, you forget the digital certificate, you do the OTP. And you know for sure the OTP is not so secure because somebody can clone your phone now, right? So it should be something like an escrow where you have to have a digital security implemented, like maybe a digital certificate or maybe a public key infrastructure where you can't decrypt that information till the time you don't have my key. It's like going back to a bank locker. 2 keys, one with me, one with the banker. He puts his key, but he can't open my lock. And I can put my key, I can't open my lock. Both have to do it. Because he owns a portion of my data and I own a portion of my data, which is my data. So, of course, I haven't seen any regulation or heard about them, but this would be an important point if you have to migrate towards that. I know I've not answered it completely, but there's no such framework which is coming in to the knowledge right now, unless Vinayak knows of.
Yeah, so this, I think, DNA, there is definitely law enforcement kind of issue with respect to the DNA use, and there was recent discussion about DNA, which of criminals basically, and matching of that basically. So that's one definitely from the investigation perspective. But this Tucker framework, which I talked about, is trying to look at some of these kind of challenges, and some of the FBI promoted framework is also there. Largely, these frameworks are coming as a assessment and assurance framework basically, not as a framework which is like very comprehensive that what we see in other areas basically. So the FBI and Tucker is the initial one, and there are definitely some areas which can probably take care of some of these kind of thing. But data security will be one of the important thing. Data ownership could be another important thing. Access to data could be another important thing in this particular thing. But we need to probably evaluate the Tucker framework to see that it addresses this or not. Anybody, any other, may not be question, may not be in fully capacity to answer those questions, but at least some contribution to discussion. Yeah.
Hi, I think it's a wonderful discussion. I just have a point or a question regarding how these hospitals are managing the patch management. I heard recently, I spoke with one of the CISO in a healthcare industry. What he mentions is, once we got a product, we got it, right? We continue to use it. Then these are like escrow agreement, or I don't know, maybe a contract agreement. We don't actually upgrade or downgrade. So what happens in those cases where we are actually providing our critical health under, like the way you said, insulin injection or the artificial heart, etc., which also has a chip which could be attacked. In those cases, how do we handle it? I know this may be not relevant to India. It may be more in the developed countries, but any thoughts there, how to address those kind of challenges?
Yeah, so last year we ran a strategy program for the CIOs of a health sector organization, and one of the key things that we try to do is we try to model the work of almost 3-4 hospitals, and in terms of what digitization service they provide, what kind of data they collect, and how they use that data basically. We had one interaction today evening with one of the CIO of Narayana Health, but because of some reason, and that somebody working in the hospital, a lot of crisis, so he would not able to join us, but with his permission, I will probably share some of the things that we deliberated there. So the 100 CIOs of a health sector organization came together and we deliberated with that. So we just look at from the hospital information collection perspective, right? And if you model that, so entire life cycle, right? Once you go there and collect the information to provide the health services, and also manage that data, and sometimes they have to also produce that, give that data on that sample for other mapping as well. For example, many times they have to support the companies which are doing this kind of a drug discovery. They have to also support government effort to see whether a particular strain of a particular virus is there or not. So entire this life cycle, and after that how they manage the data basically. So yes, there had been a lot of digitization happening there, and there is IT system or IT function which seems there at least a larger organization. And we are talking about 100 top hospitals of India, and they have CIO function now. At least there's CIO function now. Gradually, I'm seeing now under CIOs or CISOs functions are now getting built. Eventually, we'll see CISOs in health sector separately as well. There are some hospitals which has a CISO function as well. And then now privacy regulations is the one that they are quite grappling with as of now, because in privacy regulation, health data is a sensitive personal information, at least in the case of India, may not be in the case of EU. And because of that, they will get a lot of obligations, and that's why they are worried about the data privacy more, and that's why we had this discussion with them, and we ran almost 5 days kind of a strategy program for the CIOs of them. Another important part is there's an intervention, like we have seen in case of UPI. So there are a lot of intervention coming from government of India. So there is a national health, and all of us, if you have got your certificate, vaccine certificate, there's a unique identity that is noted there. All of us now unique identity, and that identity will be used in future for providing lot of the health stack specific services basically, right? And in that case, the data sharing will be very important, data standardization will be very important, and a lot of those data exchanges will happen in health sector, and a lot of discussion happening. And there is a separate NHAI which is working in this area, and there's a national health mission which is also working in this area. So this particular space will be significantly in coming future heat up in terms of the discussion of security and privacy. And there are some cases that we work together, and that's why one document that we published for the health sector, and we are doing some interactions on that as well. So this health sector is definitely, at least I'm seeing they are getting aware for this. Eventually we see other sector like pharma. Pharma is already becoming DSCI member, but the biotechnology, because there is a lot of space, startup space there, a lot of manufacturing happens, and some of the R&D also happens. We need to really look at those segments as well.
Yeah, I agree with you. So it's going to be a it's going to be a progress, but at least we are on the track.
Yeah. So another 1 or 2 minutes we have, if there is any comment. Yeah, last one.
Seen one of the American web series, Grey's Anatomy,
Yeah.
where you see the hospitals being compromised, where all the computers, come to a standstill, and there's this ransomware money being demanded to release those systems. I don't know if such an event has been witnessed in India, and we are talking about systems inside us like a pill or a pacemaker, which is more smarter, connected to internet. So I'm really worried about what could really happen in tweaking those systems, not just the computers or monitors.
Yeah, and so I had seen that episode basically, right? So the kind of picturization about attacks that could happen on them, and there is another serial which talks about something like that. So that is what until now we had been talking about CIA, right? Upper security, right? Confidential integrity and availability, right? So now there are a lot of live discussion now getting associated with the security, right? Going forward, the way the health sector is evolving and kind of things that the biological experimentation which is happening basically, right? And sometimes algorithms are being used to provide you very customized kind of thing. So attributes of security would going to change in coming future, right? We are already saying in terms of cyber physical system, we say it's not only CIA, safety is also a very important part. Right, so because if something goes wrong in a cyber physical, it will certainly impact the people working there basically, right? Similarly here, the life of an individual would also be at a stake. Suppose something would happen like this basically. So this marriage of biology and information technology would pave a very different kind of paradigm for cybersecurity, and many things and many new attributes will be also joining and would be also playing important role the way things will be evolving in future. And that's why we probably need to understand and probably need to expand the discussion about security as well here actually. And it's not only the typical articulation we had for security. We need to evolve different articulation concept and try to reflect on that. What do we mean by that basically? For example, if all of these things, if I'm tracked to the certain extent. People say that you can be tracked. All of your biological, psychological, emotional parameters can be tracked in such a way that you will remain after you as well. So there is a you after you basically. There is a post-human, post-death, right? So there is a homo deus. If somebody understand or had looked at this kind of what Yuval Harari talks about, he says that you will remain with. There is the ancient saying about you will remain as your spirit or your atma, but your data will become your spirit, right? And you will remain after that basically. So there are a lot of those discussion which is going to happen in coming future, and some of the discussion are very sensitive from the threat to life, threat to the right to live or get access to medicine, get access to proper medical care. So all that will be very important discussion in coming future, and there had been certain attacks on health sector in India as well. There was some certain report which talks about how ransomware attacks are now targeting Indian health sector organization as well. We don't have any incident which tells us that this had happened, but definitely there are some reports from government of India as well in this area. So I think we are just on the time.
Just to add to it, the way hackers move is no longer, they are like doctors. For every single piece of your body, there's a specialist. So if you want a hacker, which you can hire, you'll have a specialist for only the biotech or for a pharma. They understand. It's like recon, right? So you got to do a recon before you do that. So like you mentioned of the series, right? It's I won't say it's fiction. I won't say it's truth, but it's a mixture of fiction and truth together, because practically you can do that attack. Technically, it's possible, because pharma, biotech are still 25 years behind IT in terms of implementing. Again, goes back to the management of the companies. They listen to, there's a CISO, like he said, CISOs are coming, CIOs are coming, CISOs are coming, and so on, right? But they got to start listening to them to implement, rather than saying how much dollar is lost out.
Yeah. And with this, we'll have to really conclude because of the time. We were not thought about we will extend more than 30-40 minutes, but it's almost 1 hour. Thank you for joining and listening this interaction. We'll keep picking up this kind of a new emerging, probably not very discussed areas, and keep that, bringing that to the discussion, but not only leaving to the discussion, but taking some actions on top of it, basically. So thank you for joining. Thank you, Mohit, for joining today. Thank you.